Number 1, in recent years, public libraries in the United States have experienced reducing in their operating funds. Yeah, that's definitely not correct. Reductions, deducting, deducts. So deduct is not the right word. This is a precise word question, and it's going to be reductions in. Libraries experience something, some object noun. So if it's reducing, that would be have to be a gerund in this case. Reducing in. That's not going to be a correct object noun. It would be reductions in. That would be the correct object noun. Number 2. However, library staffing has been cut by almost 4% since 2008. Okay, so what's the relationship between the sentence before and this sentence? Is it contrasting? Before, they were losing their operating funds, and now staffing's being cut. So that's kind of cause-effect relationship. So consequently, library staffing has been cut by almost 4% since 2008. That's because they lost their operating funds. It's not nevertheless contrasting. It's not previously looking back to the past. And it's not however, which is another contrasting transition. But note, these are not exactly the same. So just because they're two contrasting transitions doesn't automatically make them wrong. So be careful about that. I know students tend to look at same answers, two of the same, test strategy for multiple choice, they must be wrong. But those aren't always exactly the same. So be careful about that. Number 3, this trend has combined with the increasing accessibility of information via the internet. Okay, so let's read this again, because this trend, combined, this is a past participle clause, combined with the increasing accessibility of information via the internet, has led some. So the trend is the subject noun. It's singular, so it won't be have. That would be they have versus he has. And it's got to be part of the main clause with the dependent clause in between. So I wouldn't have a relative pronoun like which in there. I need this to be this trend has led some to claim that librarianship is in decline. A will be the correct answer. Singular, present perfect as part of the conjugated as the main clause, the main verb. Number 6. As a result, librarians must now be proficient curators of electronic information, compiling, cataloging, and updating these collections. So this looks like a list of 3 or more elements. They must be in parallel structure. So I'll be looking for cataloging, not catalog, not librarians cataloging, and not the infinitive to catalog. D is the correct answer for 6. 8. While these classes are particularly helpful to young adults, developing basic research skills, so I've got my subordinating conjunction up front is a dependent clause separated by a comma. So I don't want a but. This won't be an independent clause combination. So but, fanboy is not what I want here. I don't want a comma and I don't want a for. I just don't want the fanboys. It's going to be delete. That's the only possible answer. It should be research skills, adult patrons can also benefit, and then we have our main clause. Adult patrons can also benefit. Correct answer for 8 is D. 10. Legal issues, law troubles, concerns related to laws. Okay, so this looks like a precise language or a precise way to say what we need to say here. So an overwhelming number of public libraries also report that they provide help with electronic government resources related to income taxes, law troubles, and retirement programs. Legal issues, that seems to be the more formal, appropriate way to say that. Concerns related to law courts, no, too wordy. Matters for the law courts, too wordy. Legal issues is the right answer, B. Number 12, this looks like a transition question, doing a vertical scan of the answer choices. The first time I visited the Art Institute of Chicago, I expected to be impressed by its famous large paintings. On the one hand, I couldn't wait to view painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. Okay, so that is maybe a particular painting the author here is impressed by. So it's not going to be on the one hand. The idea is not contrasting. It's not however, it's not contrasting, and it's not similar. It's an example, for instance. So I waited to see these big paintings, and here's one of the big paintings. For instance, this 10-foot wide Sunday afternoon painting. Correct answer for 12 is B. 13, the painter, George Seurat's painter. Okay, so this looks like it's going to be in a positive, where my subject or object noun is referred to. The painter and George Seurat are one and the same. So it says, for instance, I couldn't wait to view painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide painting. Okay, so once we say painter, there are many painters. I don't know which painter yet. So it's necessary for me to identify the painter and say George Seurat. So that's essential information. It's identifying, so it's restrictive. I don't use a comma, and I want the answer that's no comma. There are only two choices for these appositives. It's either commas on both sides of the appositive at the beginning of the name and at the end of the name, like in choice A, or no commas at all. B and C are always wrong because I'm not going to have commas on one side and not the other. 14. It took me by surprise then when my favorite exhibit at the museum was one of its tiniest. Semicolon, the Thorn miniature rooms. Okay, the Thorn miniature rooms is going to be an example of one of the tiniest, which is a great setup for a colon. So I think I'm looking for a colon. It can't be a semicolon because the Thorn miniature rooms is not an independent clause. So the semicolon answers will be wrong. And by the way, it's not going to be a comma either. Partly here because, well, really it's not going to be the apostrophe. It is tiniest room. It's possessive. It is possessing the tiniest. So it's not going to be D. It should be its possessive tiniest, colon. C will be the right answer there. So let's just read that one more time really quickly to my surprise. Then when my favorite cat exhibit at the museum was one of its tiniest, colon, the Thorn miniature room. Yes, that's explaining what the tiniest was. Okay, number 16. The couch and chairs, comma, in keeping with the style of the time, comma, are characterized by elegantly curved arms and legs, comma, they are covered in luxurious velvet. So the couch and chairs are characterized by curved arms and legs. That's an independent clause. They're covered in luxurious velvet. That's an independent clause. The first answer would be a comma splice. That can't be correct. Okay. I'm not sure this is any different. Comma, the couch and chairs are covered rather than they. Still, comma splice. They're two independent clauses. Legs, comma, are covered. Well, I wouldn't put between legs, the noun, the subject noun, and the verb, I wouldn't put a comma. We don't do that, so that's incorrect. C has to be the answer. Let's see why this works. Characterized by elegantly curved arms and legs, and are covered in luxurious velvet. So there's no subject noun for this last clause, are covered in luxurious velvet. So that means it is correct, C. It's another sort of dependent clause. They are characterized by elegantly curved arms and are covered in luxurious velvet. That is correct. C is the right answer for 16. 20. As I walked through the exhibit, I overheard a visitor's remark, you know that grandfather clock actually runs. So A is singular. I wouldn't have plural S apostrophe visitors. So that's not right. And therefore B is not right either. That's plural. So as I walked through the exhibit, I overheard a visitor singular remark, you know that grandfather clock actually runs. Now here's an interesting point. The other option is I overheard a visitor remarked, you know that grandfather clock actually runs. I know this is not correct. I know it's not correct just because of the way it sounds from experience hearing English. But if I look at it, I'm not sure I can explain it logically. I walked is past tense. I overheard is past tense. Beyond the quote, It's dotted past tense in the next sentence. So we're in past tense. I can only imagine that in the same moment of the past tense, in the present of the past, so to speak, the visitor is making his remark. Therefore, it's referred to in the present tense. I'm not sure why it's the present tense. I know it's definitely the present tense just from the way it sounds. And unfortunately, the explanation in the answers really doesn't tell you anything. It just sends, basically the simple present verb remark is appropriate verb tense. Well, wait a second. How and why is it the appropriate verb tense? I'm not sure I have the full explanation or truly understand why. I'm going to have to look this up. If anybody knows, I'd be curious to know the answer. So I know D is correct. I don't see this as a very hard problem, but technically why it's correct, a little bit of curiosity. So anyway, 21. Dotted with pin-sized knobs, another visitor. Well, all right, I see a problem right away. The other visitor is not dotted with pin-sized knobs. This is a misplaced modifier. So I can't have another visitor after this. It's not going to be another visitor dotted with same problem here, right? Another visitor dotted with pin-sized, same problem. The visitor's not dotted, it has to be D. Another visitor, notice my fascination with the tiny writing desk and its drawers. The drawers were dotted with pin-sized knobs. That makes sense. That's the correct modifier. D is the right answer for 21. 23. It has long been known that the sea otters living along the west coast of North America. Okay, so this is a participle right here, present participle. And it's definitely restrictive, modifying sea otters. So the sea otters living along the west coast, those specific sea otters, those are the ones we're talking about. Keep kelp, help keep kelp forests in their habitat healthy and vital. So I think this first choice looks pretty good. I think that's going to be the answer. Let's check the other choices. It has long been known that the sea otters living along the west coast of North America, they help. It has long been known the sea otters living along North America, they help keep forests in their habitat healthy and vital. No, there would be no need for the comma there. That's not correct. Sea otters that, I could say that as well, rather than the participle. The sea otters that live along the west coast, but I wouldn't have the and part. They live along the west coast and help keep? No, I just say help to keep. That would be appropriate and similar to the first answer choice. So C is going to be wrong. That live along the west coast of North America, where they help? No, that's a problem. That would be two dependent clauses I'm putting together, right? So where is a subordinating conjunction. That's going to make the second clause dependent. And it has long been known the sea otters living along the west coast of North America do what? That's not a complete thought. That's a dependent clause. So that's dependent clause. That can't be right. Not a complete sentence at all. The correct answer is A for 23. 25. Looks like we have transition questions here. Okay, so I'm going to read the sentence before. In fact, 2 years or less of sea otters can completely eliminate sea urchins. That's a weird sentence. I'm going to need to read above this to get the idea. They do this by feeding on sea urchin and other herbivorous invertebrates that graze voraciously on kelp. With sea otters, to keep the population of sea urchins in check, kelp forests can flourish. Okay, so the sea urchins, the otters eat the sea urchins, and then they don't eat the kelp forests, so the kelp can flourish. In fact, 2 years or less of sea otters can completely eliminate the sea urchins in a coastal area, so it's getting rid of these, I guess, bad sea urchins. Without sea otters present, kelp forests run the danger of becoming barren stretches of coastal wasteland known as urchin barrens because the urchins take over and eat all the kelp, leaving only urchins. So that's what's going on conceptually here. Again, be proactive on these relationship or transition word questions. They can be very easy, but this one is a little odd one, so you have to really ferret out what the right ideas are. So without the sea otters present, everything goes to heck. So without the sea otters present, nevertheless, kelp forests run the dangers. That's contrasting. I think that's kind of the right idea, but nevertheless is not the right contrasting transition. So we saw this in an earlier one. However, without the sea otters present, however, kelp forests run the danger of becoming barren stretches. That's the right contrasting transition. Nevertheless and however are not necessarily the same. Keep that in mind. Contrasting transitions, you'll see a lot of them, sometimes two contrasting transitions. That doesn't automatically mean they're wrong. Hence, this is not a result. Without sea otters present, hence, kelp forests, not a cause and effect. Likewise, no, it's not sort of a similar or likewise type relationship of ideas. So the correct answer for 25 is B. 27, I've got long dashes, commas, quotes, nothing before that. Well, right away we know it's that, so there's probably not going to be a comma or a long dash. It's probably going to be no. Remember the which versus that. Which, among relative pronouns, which almost always takes a comma. That almost never takes a comma. It's always restrictive. So let's just read the full sentence. A recent study by two professors at the University of California, Santa Cruz, Chris Walmers and James Estes, comma, suggests that kelp forests. So a recent study by two professors at California suggests that. So in between here is really all parenthetical, right? It's in a positive because these guys are the two professors. That's set off. So I could pull that out, which might make this easier to read. A recent study by two professors suggests that kelp forests protected by sea otters can absorb as much as 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide. That's your main clause. There would be nothing, no comma before that, which is consistent with what we probably expected given that. D will be the right answer. It's not a comma quote. There's no direct quote here. And I certainly wouldn't open with a long dash and substitute parenthetical or comma, which is not going to occur before that. Correct answer for 27 is D. 28. Okay, this looks like what's the precise language here, or the precise word in this case. Suggests that kelp forests in the areas by sea otters can absorb as much as 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as those sea urchins allowed to devour the kelp. So they're devouring. That's a strong word. They're not just eating the kelp, but they're devouring the kelp. They're dispatching the kelp. Well, it's not dispatching. That means you dispatch a cab, right? That's not eating it. So dispatching is not correct. Overindulge on kelp. That's a possibility. That is suggesting overeating. Well, that actually, as I think about it, that's the problem right there. Nothing says they're overeating the kelp. They're just eating the kelp, a lot of it perhaps. Disposing of, they're not throwing the kelp in the garbage. No, they're eating it, a lot of it. They're devouring it. That is the correct answer. 28 is A. 29. Okay, the issue here is going to be possessive or non-possessive, singular and plural. As in many cases, there are two issues at hand on grammar questions. So, like their terrestrial plant cousins, kelp removes carbon dioxide. So what's the antecedent to this pronoun? It's actually kelp, which is an unusual setup in the sentence here because this is coming before the noun. It would be like its terrestrial plant cousins, kelp. So even though cousins is next to kelp, cousins is not the antecedent of like it's the kelp, which is a singular thing. Even though there are probably many kelp plants, it's a collective or a group noun, I believe. So like its terrestrial plant cousins, that is the kelp's terrestrial plant cousins, kelp removes carbon dioxide. So I think it's singular, possessive, because it owns the terrestrial plant cousins. It's not there or there. It's going to be singular, possessive. C is the correct answer for 29. 30. Scientists knew this, but didn't recognize how large a role they played in helping kelp forests to significantly decrease the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So how large a role they played, how large a role it played, how large a role sea otters played, that they played such a large role. Okay. It's definitely a pronoun issue. Scientists knew this, but did not recognize how large a role they played. So what is they? The sea otters, probably. So it's not going to be it, that they played such a large role in keeping. I mean, that's really no different than, say, A, how large a role they played in helping, that they played such a large role in helping. A and C are kind of the same, so I think they're wrong. The real issue is here, it's not exactly clear from this sentence what the antecedent is. Is it sea otters? Is it something else? So reading the context, I think it's sea otters. So in this case, I would actually clarify sea otters. And we don't see this too often, but again, when we have this type of setup with 3 different pronouns and the actual noun, it's always better to clarify with the actual noun, unless of course we're being incredibly redundant, because we use pronouns to avoid redundancy. So, but on the test, when we see this, it's usually better to zero in on the specific noun, which again is consistent. C is the best answer. How large a role sea otters played in helping keep forests to significantly decrease. That makes it clear. 33. But they suggest that the presence of otters provides a good model of how carbon can be sequestered or removed, semicolon, from the atmosphere through the management of animal populations. Well, from's a preposition, so this second part cannot stand alone. So I can't have a semicolon. It's not an independent clause afterward. That's wrong. I don't have any semicolons. Okay. So it's going to be some form of commas looking at the other answers. Carbon can be sequestered or removed from the atmosphere through the management of animal populations. Okay, so if these were 2 different things, sequestered and removed, well, sequestering is removing. If they were 2 different things, I would just say can be sequestered and or something else from the atmosphere through the management. I wouldn't have to have any punctuation whatsoever. That's not an option looking at the answer choices. And that's good because that could be a little sneaky or trouble unless you knew sequestered and removed are basically the same thing. But they are. So what's going on here really? We're kind of defining sequestered because that's a word somebody might not know. So we're probably going to put this in commas. Sequestered, comma, or removed, comma, from the atmosphere. So that is identifying what it means to sequester. It's extra information. So do I have that option? Could be sequestered, comma, or removed. So the comma's before the underline, so or removed. No, I want the comma after it. Or removed, comma. D is going to be a correct answer. From. So that works. If I take that out, how carbon dioxide can be sequestered from the atmosphere. So if I pull that out parenthetically from D, it makes sense. Carbon dioxide can be sequestered from the atmosphere. If I put the commas elsewhere, I wouldn't be able to do that. It wouldn't read quite correctly. So those wouldn't work. D is the correct answer. 35. Okay, so if I look down here, long dash, semicolon, no punctuation or a comma, this is going to be a correct combination of clauses type question or run-on sentence question. So let's take a look. Planned obsolescence, a practice at which or by which products are designed to have a limited period of usefulness, has been, okay, this looks simply to be a dependent clause in the middle of the sentence. Modifying planned obsolescence. It's telling us what planned obsolescence is. It's a practice by which products are designed to have a limited. So I could pull this out then, which means planned obsolescence has been a cornerstone of manufacturing. That's just fine. So I don't want to mix parentheticals. So I wouldn't open with the comma that's a given here and end with the long dash. I don't want a semicolon because I don't have independent clauses on both sides. And I don't want to have no punctuation at all because I'd be setting up a parenthetical on one side but not closing it on the other. The correct answer here is going to be A. The comma closes the parenthetical phrase from a practice up to usefulness. 36. Looks like a precise language question. What's the right word? This approach increases sales, but it also stands in austere contrast to a time when goods were produced to be durable. So austere. That's severe, in case we don't know what that means. I mean, severe is kind of right, but austere, not quite the right word as to refer to a contrast. Egregious, that means bad. You made a really big mistake. That's not it. That's over the top. Unmitigated, so that means it's gone sort of without any recourse, or, that's not right. Stark. Stark is severe, but it's not as severe as austere. Stark contrast, and that's a typical phrase or idiom. It's in stark contrast to such and such. So if you've spoken English for several years, you've probably heard that and are familiar with it. D is the correct answer for 36. 39, who, whom, she. Okay, so we've got a pronoun issue, and we've got probably some differentiation between a subject who pronoun and the object who pronoun, which is whom. So let's take a look at exactly what's going on here. It was the brainchild of former journalist Martine Postma, blank, to take a practical stand in a throwaway culture. I mean, this is a participle after saying it was the brainchild of Martine Postma. So wanting, no, that's maybe even a misplaced modifier. Wanting to take, so it was the brainchild of Martine Postma. So this should say something about Martine Postma here, not wanting to take a practical stand. So we're missing the reference to him, which would be a who, not a she. It was the brainchild of former journalist Martine Postma. She wanted to take, well, we definitely want that because that would be an independent clause and an independent clause before it, which would be separated by a comma, and that's a comma's place. So that's wrong too. So A and D are wrong. Now, as a subject or an object pronoun, Martine Postma, who wanted to take a practical stand. This is a subject pronoun. Who wanted to take a practical stand in a throwaway culture. So we're turning that second clause, relative to, say, D, and making a dependent clause so that works. And by the way, one way you could do that is substitute another pronoun or that is another subject pronoun or another object pronoun in place. So Martine Postma, she wanted to take, that sounds better than her. Martine Postma, her wanted to take. No, that doesn't make sense. Her would be the object pronoun. She is the subject pronoun. So I do that sometimes with who versus whom. I substitute other subject-object pronouns to see which fits better. So the subject pronoun is definitely correct, and it's who. Although I happen to use she in my substitution, that is not the right answer as I've suggested in the first place. So C is the correct answer for 39. 41. While they wait for service, comma, patrons can enjoy coffee and snacks and mingle with their neighbors in need. While they await for service, sorry. Well, you wouldn't await for service. That means I'm anticipating. So I don't anticipate for service. That's not right. It's not await or awaiting. They're actually literally waiting, just spending their time until they get their service. So while they waited for service, this is all in past tense, since, have been, can enjoy, and mingle, present tense. The patrons can enjoy and mingle with their neighbors. So would I say while they waited in the past tense? I don't think that would be correct. While they waited for service, patrons can enjoy coffee. No, that's not right. It would have to be while they waited for service, patrons could have enjoyed coffee. While waiting for service. Yeah, that would be, in this case, waiting, I believe, would be a gerund. While waiting for the purpose of service, I think that's the right answer, D. And, again, I may not have to go through all that reasoning. It seems clear if you read it to yourself, with experience in English. While waiting for service, comma, we started with our subordinating conjunction there, setting up our dependent clause. So yeah, while waiting for service, comma, patrons can enjoy snacks. 41, the correct answer is D.